Welcome. My name is Min Beam. I'm a naturopath and a breathing coach. I've been a naturopath for nearly 35 years, which makes me a dinosaur of a naturopath. I first explored the area of breathing about 25 years ago when I did a very short Buteyko breathing course. It was just 1 hour a day for 3 days, and it totally cured my asthma. But it wasn't until 2011 that I decided to learn more about this science of breathing. And so I traveled to America to study with Patrick McKeown, who's one of the world's leading experts in breathing. And it was there that really captivated my interest, changed my life, and changed the way I treat my patients and look at illness. So I'm wanting to share with you today some information about breathing. Hopefully that will be useful for you. And the skew of this webinar is really how breathing can help with stress or managing stress. Prior to learning more about breathing, I guess if I'd heard anything about a breath, it would be a good breath is a big breath. Take a big deep breath in and a big deep breath out. But here, 6th century BC, Lao Tzu, the philosopher, said, "The perfect man breathes as if he does not breathe." So it's a very different way of looking about breathing. And perhaps, just perhaps, big breathing is not necessarily good breathing. Just like it's possible to eat too much, or it's possible to over-exercise, or in this case, take too many steroids, it is possible to overbreathe. And in fact, it is called hyperventilation syndrome. This was first noticed in the 1870s by a doctor called Da Costa, who was looking after soldiers coming back from the Civil War in America. And these soldiers had all sorts of afflictions. Initially, they thought it was cardiac or heart, and so they called it soldier's heart. But ultimately, they found that these men's illnesses were as a result of overbreathing as a result of the stress of the war. Overbreathing is taking more air than your body needs. And chronic, which means long-term overbreathing, is when this breathing has become normalized. So it's become a normal pattern. And what I do in my breathing retraining is we change this pattern, sometimes of a lifetime. So what are some of the signs that your breathing might be dysfunctional, or that you might be an overbreather? Well, here are some of them. So it could be sighing a lot, mouth breathing, definitely one, snoring. Just have a look at some of these and see if they relate to you. So no one's going to come and see me as a naturopath because they're sighing a lot. However, it's a list like this. These are the conditions people do come and book in and see me, or come book in for a doctor. And it was a list like this that really took my attention when I traveled to America in 2011 to study with Patrick, because these are the people I see. And it just amazed me to think that breathing could be part of the story here. And more interestingly, changing someone's breathing could help them with these conditions. So I'm not saying for 1 minute that every one of these conditions is because of overbreathing. But if someone has a few of these signs and one or more of these conditions, there's every chance that changing your breathing can help a lot and can sometimes reverse these altogether. So overbreathing is when the receptors in the brain that regulate your breathing become accustomed to it. So it's a habit, it's a pattern. And the exercises, and we're going to do some today, are designed to retrain and recalibrate those breathing centers using neuroplasticity to actually reverse that effect. So basically, we're changing a habit, and sometimes a habit of a lifetime. So let's do a breathing exercise. This one is called 3x3 breathing, and it's a very relaxing exercise. It helps to calm the nervous system. Before we start, I'd just like you to scan your body. Just notice, is there any stress or anxiety? It may be rated out of 10, with 10 being the most. Notice if there's any tightness in the chest, in the muscles. Maybe you've got a headache. Just notice any symptoms, and then I'd like you to reassess at the end of the 3 minutes. So we'll do this exercise for 3 minutes. And basically what it is 3 breaths followed by a pause of 3 seconds. Hence 3x3 breathing. So a breath is an inhalation followed by an exhalation, and it's a normal breath, not big or small. So it's inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, pause, 2, 3, and then you start this pattern again. So it's just a cycle of 3 breaths and a pause. All right, so if you can just be sitting comfortably. And we're going to do this for 3 minutes. With your mouth closed, and start with 3 breaths and then a pause at the end of the 3rd exhalation. So you don't keep exhaling, you pause. If that 3-second pause feels too long, you don't have to pause at all. And it's preferable to use your nose for breathing if you can. If you can't, just do what you can. If you need to have the mouth open, that's fine. Shoulders dropped, belly soft. And the tongue is resting at the roof of the mouth, the tip of the tongue behind the front teeth. So it's 3 normal breaths, then a pause, 3 normal breaths and a pause. Now, if you feel that 3 seconds is very comfortable, I'm going to ask you to see if you can extend it, that pause. So it's not how long you can hold your breath, it's how long you can comfortably hold your breath at the end of that 3rd exhalation until you feel like you'd like to breathe again. So it's 3 normal breaths, a comfortable pause, 3 normal breaths, and so on. Just noticing if you feel any more saliva in your mouth. Noticing if you feel warmer. And 3 breaths and then a comfortable pause. We're just over halfway. If it is comfortable, see if you can extend that by a second or more. Shoulders dropped and belly soft. Just a little over a minute to go. Just noticing if there's any more saliva building up in the mouth. Noticing if you feel any warmer. And just allowing that pause at the end of the 3rd exhalation until you feel the need to breathe in again. Just a few more cycles. Okay, so that's 3 minutes. Now that exercise is a really good one if you do suffer from stress, and it can be used at any time. So it can be done as a bundle of 3 to 5 minutes, or you can do that at any time. So if you're on the phone while you're waiting, perhaps in a conversation when someone else is speaking, you do the exercise anytime at all. Just doing some 3x3 breathing is going to really help settle down the nervous system. It's important to breathe with your nose if you can. Let's have a look at why. We tend to think of the nose as this bit that just juts out the front of the face. But in fact, the whole nasal cavity takes up 1/3 of the skull, which is an enormous amount of real estate. If someone created us, what were they thinking? More storage space, because you can't have enough? Or are there reasons why this space that's devoted to the nose is so large? So let's have a look. We breathe in through the nostrils, and the breath swirls around these nasal turbinates and comes down here into the windpipe of the trachea. And while we're here, have a look at the tongue. It's a really large group of muscles. In fact, it's the strongest muscle for its size in the body. So we're now coming into the lungs. This is the trachea that splits into two, into the bronchi, and then into smaller and smaller little airways known as bronchioles. And they end up in these grape-like clusters called alveoli. And they're only one cell thick, and this is where the oxygen from the air that we're breathing in crosses over into the body, and the carbon dioxide that we produce is exhaled. Now, this is a resin cast of someone's lungs. Again, the trachea, the bronchi, and in the smaller and smaller little bronchioles, look how delicate they are, look how many there are. The alveoli have been taken off in this instance. Now, if someone was to measure, and they have measured, the surface area available for this oxygen delivery into the body, it's as big as a tennis court, all screwed up, wrapped up in the size of our lungs. So why should we breathe through the nose? Well, it's an enormous filter. The lining of the nasal cavity is lined with mucous membranes and lymph tissue. Lymph tissue is part of our immune system. So that is an amazing filter. It's the first defense against viruses, fungi, bacteria, also dust, noxious gases. So you're filtering using the nasal cavity. It also warms and moistens. So if the air outside is, say, 6 degrees centigrade, by the time it's at the back of your throat, it's 30 degrees. And by the time it's in the lungs, it's 37 degrees or body temperature. Now, of course, the lungs are internal organs. They want things to be as moist and as warm as the rest of the body. So breathing with your mouth open is a real shock to the lungs. And if you're an asthmatic, that cold, dry air is often a trigger for an asthma attack. Breathing through the nose also regulates the amount of air. So if you're mouth breathing, you're breathing 1.5 times more. So if you're getting the idea now that more is not necessarily better. Breathing through the nose also slows and quietens the amount of air. So by the time it's in the lung, getting into the lungs, it's very soft and gentle. It's not this harsh, big breath. This is particularly true for snoring. So if you think of the trachea as a semi-collapsible tube, it's made of muscle and cartilage, and you think of the trachea as the windpipe as a straw. So the straw, we're sucking in, say a thick shake. Does that sound familiar? So a big breath of air in, and that straw has partially collapsed. And that is causing the vibration of the voice box, causing the snoring sound. And if it was a big breath, it could totally collapse that straw, and that would be a sleep apnea or an apnea. It's just one of the reasons for sleep apnea. But really, so we're wanting the breath to be small, gentle, rather than big. The nasal cavity is also the producer of a large amount of a gas called nitric oxide. The other area of the body that makes nitric oxide is the endothelial lining of the blood vessels. And the nitric oxide in that instance improves blood flow, and as it does also in the nasal cavity. So the nitric oxide is a really important gas. It's antimicrobial, it's antioxidant, it helps the fine hairs of the nose and the lungs eliminate waste. So we make so much in the nasal cavity. If you're using your mouth to breathe, you're losing all of that. I'll just leave you with this. Now, where should the tongue be? Well, obviously in the mouth, but should it be at the roof, the middle, or the bottom? It's actually at home on the spot, which is the roof of the mouth. How you can locate this is two ways. One, make a popping sound or a clicking sound. And it's before the actual sound. Can you feel that? It's just where those ridges are, which kind of are like little suction caps. That's where the tongue should rest all day and all night, except for when you're eating and talking. Another way of locating the spot is to smile and swallow. Okay, so that's where the tongue should be. So the only time I'm going to ask you to have your mouth open now, where's your tongue? It drops down. So that's a place I'd like you to train the tongue to be. There's lots of really interesting reasons why the tongue should be up there. Now we're going to do another exercise, and this is called cadence breathing. So this is breathing to a pattern or a rhythm. And we're going to trial a few rhythms to see which one is best for you. And it doesn't matter. We're going to do one that's 2 seconds in and 3 seconds out, 3 seconds in, 5 seconds out, and 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. So we're going to do it for 3 minutes, and I want you to see how you feel before and after the exercise. So as you breathe in, it's to a particular number of seconds, and as you breathe out, it's a particular number of seconds. So the way I'm going to speak you through, I'll say in, as then I'm saying in, you're starting to breathe in through the nose, if you can. And then I'm going to say and out. And as I'm saying and, you're starting to breathe out through the nose. So I'll be doing 2 seconds in, 3 seconds out, 3 seconds in, 5 seconds out, and 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. I'll be giving each one about 3 or 4 goes. And then I'll say change, and then we're going to the next rhythm. Once you've chosen which rhythm suits you the best, then we're going to do that for 3 minutes. Okay, breathing in 2 and out 3. 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 Change. In 2, 3 and out 3, 4, 5. 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 Change. In 2, 3, 4 and out 3, 4, 5, 6. In 2, 3, 4 and out 3, 4, 5, 6. In 2, 3, 4 and out 3, 4, 5, 6. So which one felt the most comfortable? It doesn't matter which one, but we're going to do that for 3 minutes. You might, after a minute or so, feel you can extend that breathing a little bit, but it doesn't matter. It's got to feel comfortable. So in and out through the nose if you can. And let's start. We're going to do this for 3 minutes. So you're breathing in for 2 or 3 or 4 seconds, and you're breathing out for 3 or 5 or 6 seconds. If possible, the mouth is closed, the tongue is resting at the roof of the mouth, the shoulders dropped and the belly soft. Noticing the breath as it enters and leaves the nostrils, like a fine stream of air. And staying with the rhythm that feels most comfortable. Again, if you feel you can extend it from 2 seconds and 3 seconds to 3 seconds and 5 seconds, try it. And if it doesn't feel comfortable, come back to what feels most comfortable in your body. Just noticing if there's any more saliva in the mouth. Noticing if you feel warmer. We're coming up to halfway now. Let's settle into the body and notice the breath as it enters and leaves the nose. Maybe 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds in, 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 6 seconds out. Whatever feels good in your body. Shoulders dropped, belly soft, tongue resting on the roof of the mouth. Okay, so that's 3 minutes. You might like that one. You might like that 3 by 3 that we did previously. Remember, the 3 by 3 was a 3 breaths and a pause. This one is slightly different. They're actually doing similar things in the body that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But this one's interesting in that the out breath is 1.5 times longer than the in breath. So when we breathe in, we activate our flight and fight nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system. And when we breathe out, we activate the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So that's the reason for the slightly longer exhale. Although we need both nervous systems, generally what we'd like to exaggerate or be held in a little longer is that parasympathetic nervous system. So this one breathing technique is actually being studied quite a lot. And there is one large study that followed people over, I think, quite a few years actually. And they were doing 10 minutes of this cadence breathing twice a day. And the people that did this breathing showed less heart disease, less diabetes, less anxiety and depression. In fact, there were other really positive health outcomes. So if you can do this for 10 minutes twice a day, that would be excellent. But even just a few of them during the day, if that felt good, then I'm going to invite you to see if you can include this. If you commute, if you're waiting in a queue, do some 3 by 3 or cadence breathing. Let's have a look at what's going on in the body when we're doing these breathing exercises. And it's actually all about carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is a gas that we make when we're making energy in the body. So our energy comes from our fuel, which is our food. So food is carbohydrate, fat, and protein. And they all break down to carbons, oxygens, and hydrogens. So we're eating, the food is then broken down into these little molecules, and they go into the mitochondria in the cells, and we get energy out of that. The carbons, hydrogens, and oxygens are not destroyed. They need to be converted. So energy comes out, and those elements, those atoms, then go to make water, hydrogens and oxygens, and carbon dioxide, carbon and oxygen. This is why carbon dioxide is called a waste gas. It's not a waste gas. It's made it's a byproduct of energy. However, the body is really clever and doesn't waste anything. We need to get rid of some of it, but carbon dioxide is a really important gas in the body. So there's a few things that it does, but what we're going to focus on today is just one part of that. Carbon dioxide actually helps to improve oxygenation in the body. It sounds a bit paradoxical or counterintuitive, but higher carbon dioxide will mean more oxygen. It's called the Bohr effect. So basically, in the presence of carbon dioxide, the hemoglobin molecule that's holding the oxygen on the red blood cells going around the body, it will release its cargo of oxygen. It's called the Bohr effect, or the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Carbon dioxide also helps to relax smooth muscle. We've got two major types of muscle in the body. We've got skeletal, which we tend to think of as muscle. So that's the quadriceps and the biceps. And then there's smooth muscle. Now, smooth muscle is the tubing of the body. I mentioned before that the breathing technique helped my asthma. That's because the lungs the airways are smooth muscle. And asthma is a condition where those airways are constricted. So having a slightly higher amount of carbon dioxide meant that they opened up. Smooth muscle is also blood vessels. So I asked you in the couple of exercises, do you feel warmer? If you felt warmer, it's a sign of the buildup of carbon dioxide helping to open those small capillaries and small blood vessels, getting more blood flow, so you felt warmer. And this is where I'd like to spend more time in this webinar, looking at the effect of carbon dioxide on the parasympathetic nervous system. So in each of the exercises we did, 3x3 or cadence breathing, either we paused the breath or we slowed it down. In both situations, we're increasing carbon dioxide, and we're trying to get the brain to tolerate higher amounts of carbon dioxide because of the benefits. Because if you're an over breather, if you've got this dysfunctional breathing pattern, you've been losing too much. So it's not having too much carbon dioxide. We just want you to get the right amount. You've been traveling here. We want you to be here. Now, the breathing retraining courses that I teach really emphasizes this. So I give you exercises specific to you that help to really regulate this, or, recalibrate your breathing center. So these exercises I'm teaching you in this webinar are lovely, and they start to do that. But if you want to change it for good, you really need to do some more powerful exercises, which I teach in my course. So let's have a look at the effect of breathing and stress, and how simple breathing exercises may be able to reduce the stress response. We often talk about stress in relationship to the way we evolved, which seems a bit strange, but actually our bodies haven't changed that much. Back in the day, any stress was physical. Nowadays, stress can be other things than physical. And so the stress hormones were all about preparing the body for this physical threat, running away from the bear or fighting the bear. So let's have a look at the effect of the hormones of stress on the body. And then we'll talk about the connection of breathing, because there's a big connection. So the hormones of stress are adrenaline, sometimes referred to as epinephrine, and cortisol. They are both produced by the adrenal glands, adrenal on top of kidney, renal is kidney, ad on top of. So this is the cortex, which makes cortisol, and this is the medulla, which makes adrenaline. They are both produced in response to stress. Stressors, you don't have to perceive it as a stress for the adrenal glands to make the stress hormones. Stress can be extremes of cold or heat, an infection, pain, surgery, lack of sleep, relationship difficulties, jet lag, too much exercise, an accident or a fall, work or study stress. So these are all stresses that the adrenal glands will produce stress hormones. As I said, you don't have to perceive it as a stress for the body to say it's a stress and produce adrenaline and cortisol. We've got the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord and the nerves. How this communicates with the rest of the body is via the autonomic nervous system: sympathetic, flight and fight and freeze; parasympathetic, rest and digest. The stress hormones affect the autonomic nervous system. Let's have a look at adrenaline, and then we're going to have a close look at cortisol. And this is the way adrenaline affects the body when it's produced. And as I mentioned, we often talk about it in this, as relating to the way we evolved, fighting the bear, running away from the bear. So even though the bear nowadays is a deadline or an argument, it's still doing the same things in the body. So let's have a look at adrenaline. Adrenaline will make the pupil dilate. That's so that you can let more light in and run through the jungle and not trip over those vines. You are more likely to sweat or perspire. That's so that that water can evaporate, cooling your body down as you flee or fight. The lungs dilate, allowing more oxygen into the body. Remember, if someone has an anaphylactic reaction, their airways close up, what are you meant to give them? If you have one handy or they have one handy, an EpiPen. Epinephrine or adrenaline opens the airways. The digestive system decreases. Really, if you're running away from the bear, now is not the time to bring out that little burger, sit on a rock and have a chew. This is a wonderful quote by a physiologist in 1802 who said, "Should this man receive bad news, or should sad and baneful passions suddenly arise in his soul, his stomach and intestine will immediately cease to act on the foods contained in them. The very juices in which the foods are already entirely dissolved will remain as though struck by a moral stupor." I love this piece of writing, but what is really interesting is the word stress as we know it was not coined until the 1950s by a man called Hans Selye. And yet, here's this physiologist 150 years before saying bad news or sad and painful passions, i.e. stress, affects the digestion. You know how in both of those exercises, I asked if you had more saliva in your mouth. If you said yes, that's a sign that you've got increased carbon dioxide because it's switched on the parasympathetic nervous system. When we're stressed, the digestive system shuts down. When you're very stressed, you have a dry mouth. When you're more relaxed, you have more saliva. And that's a sign that the whole digestive tract is relaxed and ready to receive a meal, if you were to give it one, and you would be, the digestive system's working much more happily. You're going to be able to digest and absorb your nutrients more. A lot of digestive problems are made worse or caused by stress. Adrenaline's a very exciting hormone. So I am not saying that you don't need these hormones. In fact, they are so important in the body. It's just having too much of them for too long. Metabolic rate increases, your muscle strength increases. This is the one where the baby's under the car, the mother's able to lift the car. Penis engorges, apparently, so you can procreate before you die. And mental activity increases, so you can figure out how to run away from the bear or kill the bear. So it's very adaptive. Your peripheral outer circulation constricts, because you're wanting the blood to go to the heart and lungs and big muscles. You can afford to lose a finger or toe to save your life. The blood sugar increases, and this is the fuel for the muscles. Platelets coagulate so you don't bleed out after being bitten by the bear. Blood fats increase, again, fuel for the muscles, and your heart rate and blood pressure increase, getting that blood pumping through the body. So really good, again, fighting the bear. Not so good if you're sitting at your chair. Diabetes, clots, heart disease. This is why the stress hormones in excess are a problem for us. So let's look at cortisol, the evil cousin of adrenaline, and produced at the same time, even though you might not feel it. Adrenaline's that one that gives you the buzz. You can feel it sometimes. I had a very bad car accident in my 20s, and even today, if I hear a screech of tires, I can feel that flood of adrenaline. All right, let's look at cortisol. Now, this is the chemical structure of cortisol that we make, and I've put it on this slide next, comparing it to the drug cortisone or prednisolone. So cortisone is prescribed for what reason? Inflammation. You've been bitten by the bear. So they are very good, and cortisone is a life-saving drug. It's amazing. However, doctors are loath to prescribe it in high amounts for long periods of time because of the side effects. And that's the same as cortisol. Let's have a look at the negative part of cortisol. So it will reduce your immune system. Your muscle tissue will waste. It's called sarcopenia. You will bruise more easily. Wounds won't heal as well. Blood sugars increase, blood fats increase, similar to adrenaline in that way. Blood pressure increases, cholesterol increases, much more at risk of osteoporosis, of depression. Cortisol increases, serotonin decreases. Memory will be affected, libido will be affected, water retention, risk of cataracts and glaucoma, all sorts of hormonal problems for men and for women, including PMS, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, menopausal problems, weight gain, acne, and insomnia. So high cortisol, low melatonin. These are a lot of the conditions I see, and I do often, 9 times out of 10, see a link with prolonged stress and these conditions. So it's bad news. Yes, it is bad news. Is there something we can do about it? Yes, there is. So if you can remove your stress, please do it. You know, if you can get out of that job or leave the relationship or something, do it. But if you can't, then what you have control over is your body and your breathing. So interestingly, stress itself changes your breathing. It's adaptive. You're running away from the bear. The breathing gets faster. You know, that's an acute example, but it's more subtle than that. So stress itself can be causing this dysfunctional breathing over time. You're breathing faster, you're breathing higher. Changing your breathing certainly can't change the stress, but it can change your body's response to it. So changing your breathing changes the stress hormones. Increasing carbon dioxide switches on the parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic, rest and digest. Sympathetic, flight and fight and freeze. We want more of this, less of this. The breathing increases this, dampens down this. So I don't know whether you noticed in the 3x3 or the cadence, whether you felt calmer. A lot of people do. And it's because in both of those exercises, we increase carbon dioxide, and that's calmed down the nervous system. Remember in the old days when people were given, with panic attacks, were given paper bags to breathe into, it's exactly the same, recirculating carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide switches on the parasympathetic nervous system, and the cadence breathing and the 3x3 breathing, they're really good exercises. So they will start to help to increase the carbon dioxide so that you are responding less to the stressors. I'm just going to give you a few other tips to help with the stress response. Caffeine, of course, stimulates adrenaline. Now, not everyone is susceptible to caffeine. If you know it, if you are. So if you feel a bit jittery after a cup of coffee, I'm going to suggest you reduce. No more than 5 cups of coffee for anyone. But for the very sensitive, I'm going to suggest maybe thinking of reducing or even eliminating it. Another thing that can affect the stress response is having processed sugar. So all carbohydrate turns into sugar. So I'm not saying reduce your fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes. I'm saying processed sugar. So this is added sugar. And you can tell if it's added if it's more than 5 grams per 100 grams on a label. Basically, the body, a 70 kilogram person, has only about 1 teaspoon or 5 grams of blood glucose or blood sugar. If you add to that considerably, it's quite stressful for the body to get that glucose out of the blood into the cells. One way of stabilizing blood sugar levels is not having processed sugar, but also having protein with each meal. So that can be animal protein like eggs and meat, fish, or legumes, nuts and seeds. And they're good vegetarian sources of protein. Being hydrated is really important. The brain is a very wet organ, and being dehydrated is quite stressful on the body. We need about 30 mils per kilogram. It doesn't have to be water, but water's good. It can be herbal teas, it can be juices, it can be soups. Fruits and vegetables themselves contain a lot of water or fluid. So 30 mils per body kilogram of fluid a day. That's for a 70 kilogram person, about 2.1 litres of fluid. Okay, so always breathe with your nose, a bit of a review, the 3x3 breathing, the cadence breathing, often during the day, reducing caffeine and sugar, having protein regularly, and to be hydrated. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this webinar. There's so much about the breath that's so interesting, and how it can affect your health and reduce your stress levels, which has been the focus of today's webinar. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please email me. I've got a YouTube channel, I've got Instagram, I'm all over social media. I also teach breathing courses, which is where all of these benefits can be made permanent. So that's the idea, that you breathing retraining, breathing boot camp. Thank you so much for joining me.